chapter 15? Listen. This is the last chapter before the test. It's about the cell cycle.
No.
See, a cell goes through cycles. What a cell does is it grows. It starts small, and it grows, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it divides. And then it's small again. And the cycle starts over. And it grows and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then divides again. Grows, gets bigger and bigger, divides again. Grows, gets bigger and bigger, divides again. It's a cycle. It goes over and over. You start with one cell, it divides, then you have two. Then each of those cells divide, and you have four. Then 8, then 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, 2048, 4096, 8192, 16384, 32,768. I'm doubling the numbers every time. So you can go from one cell to a whole bunch of cells really quickly by doubling every time. These are what cells do. Have you ever had an infection? An infection is a single little cell getting in your body somewhere and multiplying, eating up your body as it grows and multiplies. About half of people used to die from infections before antibiotics were invented. Some at very young ages. So take this class, just cut it right down the middle, that half gone. That's what it used to be like. Isn't that tough? Life was tough back then. A lot of death. A lot less now. They tell you about the good old days. Nuh-uh. These are the good days now with modern medicine. Tell them next time they start talking about the good old days. Say, oh yeah, back when people used to die of infections. Now, why do cells do this? Why do cells grow and grow and then they divide? Why not? Why do they divide? Why not just keep getting bigger and bigger? That's a good question. Why not cells just get bigger and bigger, and so instead of you being made of 80 trillion cells, why aren't you just made of 100 cells or so that are real big cells? There's a good reason. What's that? It has to do with what's called surface area to volume ratio. Can you say surface area to volume ratio?
Surface area to volume ratio.
Oh, y'all are way better than the other class.
It's the first time we've been called that.
Yeah, they weren't too enthusiastic about saying surface area to volume ratio. So if you notice, here's a small cell on the left. Do you know how to figure out the surface area of a cell? You know, the surface area of something is the part on the outside that you can touch. The surface area of this cup is just the part I'm touching on the outside, not what's on the inside. And how you figure it mathematically is by figuring out the for a square cell like this, you figure out the area of one side and you multiply by 6 because there's 6 sides. So if this cell is 1 millimeter on each side, then one side is going to be 1 times 1, which is 1 square millimeter, times 6, because there's 6 sides, so 6 square millimeters. Did y'all see how that was figured? You figure out the area of one side, and then you multiply by 6 to get the area of all 6 sides. Does that make sense? So the surface area of this small cell is 6 square millimeters. But what's the volume of this small cell? Do y'all know how to figure out volume? Have y'all done this in math yet?
No.
Volume is length times width times height. So you just multiply 1 times 1 times 1 to figure out the volume. The volume of this small cell is 1 cubic millimeter. So the surface area to volume ratio is 6 divided by 1. A ratio means division. And we end up with a number equal to 6. If you look at a big cell, though, like this one over here, it has a much different surface area to volume ratio. Do me a favor with your group. Try and figure out the surface area of this big cell right here. Just the surface area. Try and figure that out right now. 10 points if you can get it right. It's a math problem. What's the surface area of this big cell right here? You can use a calculator if you want. How do you find the surface area?
Sorry, Your Highness.
Wait, which one are we buying?
The big one on the right. What's the surface area of it?
I feel so bad.
Square.
Less area, so it
One side times all the other sides.
Surface area. Oh, hey, look at this. Blue got it. Purple missed it.
I almost did that. Hold on.
Orange missed it.
Isn't it just length times width times?
Surface area.
Oh, surface
Anyone
area.
else?
I'm doing it.
One group got it. Two groups missed it.
Which group got
Wait,
it?
we're still doing
So far, only blue got it.
Oh,
Anyone else?
Alright, here we go. Here we go. There you go.
Yes, white got it. Anyone else? Going. Go. Grace. Yes, green got it. Anyone else? So the answer is 96. So how do we get that? 4 times 4. That's the area of one side. What's 4 times 4? 16. And then you multiply that by 6 to get all 6 sides. 4 times 4 times 6. 96. So the surface area of this big one is 96. What's the volume of the big one?
64.
4 times 4 times 4, which is 64. So the surface area to volume ratio of this is 96. Oh, I got it on here. 96 divided by 64. I did it for the other class. What's 96 divided by 64? 1.5. So the surface area to volume ratio of the big cell is much smaller than the surface area to volume ratio of the little cell. This is little cell, and this is big cell. So what does that mean? What that means is the little cell has a lot more surface area than it has volume. The big cell has a lot less surface area compared to its volume. If you're a cell, you want to have a lot of surface area. You take in food through your surface. You take in oxygen through your surface. You get rid of waste through your surface. You want to have a lot of surface. If you don't have a lot of surface, you can't take in enough food, you can't take in enough oxygen. And this big cell doesn't have nearly enough surface to get everything done, to take in everything it needs. The little cell has a lot more surface compared to its volume. Compared to its volume, this little thing is mostly surface, isn't it? There's not much volume in there. But this big thing is mostly volume. There's not nearly as much surface compared to the volume. You want to have a lot of surface. That's the bottom line. That's why cells are small. If anyone asked you why are cells small, you wouldn't have known until just now. Why are cells small? What would you say?
Because the cell wants to have a lot of surface area.
Cell needs a lot of surface. Make sense?
Yeah.
The smaller the cell, the more surface it has compared to its volume. That's it. Okay? So now you know why cells are small. I'm going to answer all your questions eventually this year. Now, how does a simple cell multiply? It's called binary fission. Binary fission is how prokaryotic cells multiply. You know what I'm talking about when I say a prokaryotic cell?
They have a nucleus.
They don't have a nucleus. Prokaryotic don't have a nucleus. What they have is they have a chromosome that's circular that hangs out in the middle. And what they do is they replicate that chromosome. They copy it. So they go from 1 chromosome to 2 chromosomes. You see how there's 2 chromosomes there? And then the cell breaks apart in the middle. It's called cytokinesis. Can you say cytokinesis?
Cytokinesis.
That means breaking apart in the middle. and now you have 2 cells. This is how bacteria and archaea multiply. It's very fast. They can do it in as fast as 20 minutes. You go from 1 cell to 2, and that's how they do it. It's called binary fission. You want to see video footage of it?
Oh yeah.
Now they've sped up this video a bit, but this is what an infection is like. Let me get back here. This is what an infection is like. This is why you don't want to get bacteria in your body. Let me start it over.
Oh yeah.
You don't want this. Streptococcus pneumoniae. This is what causes pneumonia. And they've sped this up. Have you ever had pneumonia? You got these things growing in your lungs.
That's pretty disgusting.
Just wait.
He's pretty.
They're just getting going. And they're eating, and they're multiplying, and they're copying their DNA and splitting in 2. If you watch one of them, notice it'll get longer, and then it'll split in 2. See how fast they can multiply? Now this is sped up. It actually takes 20 minutes to get a multiplication. But, see if it says at the beginning how fast it's sped up. Speed times 540. So it would actually take 540 times longer than that for that to happen. But still, that was less than a 1 minute video. So you're talking about 540 minutes. That's less than 10 hours to go from there to there. And you could imagine if that was happening in your lungs, you would have a big problem down there in your lungs.
A little bit.
That's why you get real sick.
I kind of hate learning about this when, like, once you see
So,
what's happened.
you don't want infections, and luckily they found medicines that would kill infections. They call them antibiotics. And if you ever get an infection, you take antibiotics and it kills the bacteria. That's helpful. Now, your cells don't multiply quite as fast. And it's a little more complicated what eukaryotic cells do. This binary fission process, this is for prokaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells, they look like this. And you can watch how these multiply. It's a little bit slower. This is way sped up as well. These are eukaryotic cells on a fluorescent screen, crawling around, multiplying. And it's not quite as fast. But if you watch them, you might see one divide in 2. Can you see any dividing in 2?
Mm-hmm.
And they go through a series of phases. It's starting over. You can see there's less here than at the end of the video. That one's going to split.
It's like the really purple ones.
Oh, there it goes. Oh, it split. The cell cycle is a series of phases that you're going to have to know. Okay? And there's 2 main parts. There's what we call interphase, which is normal cell life. And then there's mitosis, which is when the cell divides in 2. So cells go through interphase, that's the big blue part, and mitosis. Interphase, and then mitosis. And after mitosis, you have 2 little bitty cells. And during interphase, this long blue phase here, there are actually 3 parts to it. There's G1, there's S, and there's G2. You're going to have to know what each of these parts are. Okay? So, let's start with G1. G1 is the first growth phase. That's when the cell is growing and getting bigger and eating and taking in oxygen and making ATP, and its organelles are multiplying and growing, and the cell just gets bigger and bigger. That's the G1 phase. We call it G1 because it stands for first growth phase. Then there's a time called the S phase. The S phase is when the cell is copying its DNA. Do you remember the prokaryotic cell had to copy its DNA? Why would you want to copy your DNA if you're going to multiply?
So it's not like stupid. So the other one's not.
Both of them need the information.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Yeah, that's good. So both cells need to copy the information, and so you have to copy the DNA. That's S phase. S stands for synthesis. Have you ever heard that word synthesis? Synthesis is making new stuff. So in the synthesis phase, you're making new DNA. Guess what G2 is? If G1 was the first growth phase, G2 is the second growth phase. So it's growing a little bit more. It's making a bunch of proteins and stuff that it needs for multiplication. So you got your G1 first growth phase, your S phase where you're copying the DNA, your G2 phase, a little more growth and making some proteins needed for mitosis, and then you have this mitosis, this mitotic phase where the cell is actually dividing. In one of your cells, interphase takes about 23 hours. And mitosis takes about an hour. Now, not all of your cells are rapidly multiplying like this. Only some of them are. The cells that produce your hair are rapidly multiplying. The cells that produce your skin are rapidly multiplying. Your brain cells are not anymore. They were when you were a fetus, and they slowly stop multiplying as you get older. And y'all got about 5 or 6 more years of pretty good multiplication of your brain cells, but they're not multiplying nearly as fast as they were when you were an infant. And most of the brain cells are made even before you're born. So those have kind of slowed down. And your muscle cells, they aren't multiplying much anymore either. Yeah?
What does it do in the S stage?
The S phase is when it copies the DNA. It makes a copy of its DNA, so each new cell can get some of the DNA. Yes?
Why do they stop multiplying?
Well, you just don't need any more of them after a certain point. I mean, I got my muscles right, and they're huge, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And that's as much as I need. So the cells can quit multiplying now. I got all the muscle I need. Maybe if I work out some, the cells might multiply a little bit more. But for the most part, I got all the muscle I need, and you got all the brain cells you really need, and so they don't need to keep multiplying. And so what happens when the cells stop multiplying, they go into this resting phase that we call G0, meaning zero growth. And they're not multiplying anymore. And a lot of your cells are in this resting phase. Now sometimes a cell can come out of the resting phase and go into the G1 and start growing more and multiplying. And that can happen. But oftentimes they'll just sit in the resting phase. Most of your brain cells, after they're made, will just sit in a resting phase for the rest of your life and not multiply anymore. Yeah.
Do they shrink in G0?
No, they don't shrink. They stay about the same size.
So when they stay the same size and then go back into G1, so they just grow more?
Then they can grow a little bit more and then multiply. Yeah. That's right. You want to see video footage?
Yes.
Now this video shows all the M phases.
Eukaryotic cells follow a process of growth and division called the cell cycle. These events include a growth stage, mitosis or nuclear division, and cytokinesis or...
Okay, so this is going to show us all the phases. I just want to tell you, in this video they talk about the mitosis phases, which is actually chapter 16 for us. You don't have to know the mitosis phases yet.
Follow a process of growth and division called the cell cycle. These events include a growth stage, mitosis or nuclear division, and cytokinesis or division of the cytoplasm. Throughout interphase, the cell is engaged in growth and metabolic activities. Interphase can be further broken down into 3 discrete phases called G1, S, and G2. During the G1, or first growth phase, normal cell functions occur as well as cell growth. In the S phase, DNA replicates, producing 2 copies of each chromosome. During the G2 phase, the cell continues to prepare for mitosis and cell division. Mitosis, or the M phase, has 4 stages: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase.
We learned those later.
During prophase, the chromosomes become visible and condense, becoming shorter and thicker. Each identical copy of a single chromosome is called a sister chromatid. The nuclear envelope breaks down and spindle fibers form as microtubules grow out of the centrioles that move to opposite poles of the cell. During metaphase, the double-stranded chromosomes line up along the equator of the cell. The spindle is now fully formed and the microtubules attached to each sister chromatid. Anaphase begins when the sister chromatids of each chromosome begin to separate. The centromere that holds sister chromatids together divides, and the chromosomes move away from each other along its spindle fiber.
Look, the cell's dividing.
In telophase, the 2 groups of chromosomes reach the opposite ends of the cell. As a new nuclear envelope starts to form around each group, the chromosomes uncoil and the spindle disappears. The division of the cytoplasm and organelles is called cytokinesis, or the C phase. The result of mitosis and cytokinesis is the formation of 2 genetically identical cells. To summarize the entire cycle,
So, we'll start with the summary, but once you go through all these phases and you got 2 cells, it can start all over. Now the last part, hold on, don't get up. The last part talks about there's checkpoints. There's places in the cycle where the cell can check itself and make sure everything's okay. And if the cell sees that things aren't right at these checkpoints, the cell can stop the multiplication. And can say, hey, something's wrong, and can actually make the cell kill itself. Cell suicide happens. It's called apoptosis, and the cell can kill itself if something's wrong.